Hi, Leslie Koo here. According to the latest China trade data, the crude oil imports, because of the US-Iran war, the close of the Hormuz Strait, the crude oil imports fell, or plunged, call it, in April, in May, and in June. But of course, the war started at the end of February. So why the March crude oil import still maintain the usual levels? I reckon is because those shipments for March, fulfilling the March order would have been out of the Middle East region and to the various refinery facilities in Southeast Asia, so on and so forth. So that's why we see a huge drop in April, May, and June. And also, we can see that this gap has not been filled up by the local productions. As you can see, the local production is still, the local crude oil productions is more or less pretty stable, right? And there isn't any huge rise in terms of output in the month of April, May, and June. Now, let's look at from another perspective in terms of the millions of barrel per day. So this is the millions barrel per day statistics, which I use the official data to calculate and convert them into millions barrels per day statistics. Now, the whole thing, like the whole total crude oil available to China, includes the crude oil imports, as well as the local productions, and the Iranian oil. There is no official data about how many barrels per day that China buys from Iran. There's no official data, but from the internet, which I searched, the figures is about 1.4 to 1.8 million barrel per day. So I just average out. It worked out to be 1.6 million barrels per day on average. The Iranian oil bought by China. So, add this up. And it still cannot fill up the gap, close the gap in April, May, and June. And we're thinking that, wow, that is big trouble. China is in big trouble because the China economic engine is short of crude oil to run. But the thing is, if you look at some major economic indicators of China, cargo flows still pretty alright, and exports, the value is more or less stable, a bit on the high side in April, May, and June. And industrial output growth, it turned out a bit, but it didn't collapse. In a nutshell, it shows that China economy, when there is a huge fall in crude oil imports, or that there's a huge gap in crude oil available to the economy, the economic activities did not, in that 3 months, did not stop and did not collapse and stop. It continues moving forward. So, of course, how should I say, people will think that for this gap, China will dip into the crude oil reserve, to withdraw and then fill the gap. So let's see what's the numbers. On average, in terms of million barrels per day, between the 12th month to March, it's about 18.68 million barrels per day. And the shortage, when it plunged, the shortage is, on average, is about 5.37 million barrels per day. And so what that means is that China, for these 3 months, April, May, and June, on average, we have to withdraw 5 plus million barrels per day from the reserve to keep the economic engine running. Well, that is one scenario. Okay. If you think of it, China have been working on increasing the efficiency in terms of production, in terms of industrial development, so on and so forth, and invested heavily on green technology, green energy. So there is, I see it, besides dipping into the crude oil reserve scenario, there is another scenario which we should look at from this perspective. That is the shortage of 5 plus million barrel per day of crude oil may not be a huge hoo-ha to the economic agent. As you can see, the China economy continue to go, the sectors continue to go, to move on. And, well, this shortage of crude oil has little impact on China economy for these 3 months, based on the statistics. And we cannot rule out the scenario that, given all the efficiency that in terms of technology, in terms of green energy, technology, so on and so forth, China may not be needing so much crude oil, like as many crude oil as it needs, we thought before. In fact, China uses much less crude oil in terms of keep the economic engineering, less than we thought. And just that China hasn't bragging about it, that, hey, our green technology, green energy, so on and so forth, the alternative energy sources, etc., have allowed us to use less crude oil than before. I mean, China hasn't said that, doesn't mean that it's not true. So this scenario, China actually has been using less crude oil to keep the economic engine running, or in fact can run at a faster pace, much less crude oil than we thought it needs. So for those imports numbers, the crude oil numbers, you add up all the availability from the domestic productions, the crude oil imports from Iran, all this. Maybe they use part of it for the economy, and the other part, they put it back into, they put into the crude oil reserve. That's why I say it is likely that instead of withdrawing from the crude oil reserve during these difficult times, during this wartime, this closure of Hormuz and so on and so forth. Instead of withdrawing from the crude oil reserve, maybe it just stop adding to the crude oil reserve. Before the war, every month has been adding to the reserve pile, but just that for these 3 months, it just doesn't add, rather than withdrawing from the crude oil reserve. Let me know what you think. You can leave the comments below. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Cheers.